Good afternoon. Welcome to the program Artist and Critic. I'm Don Gray. With us today is the distinguished American painter Isabel Bishop. She is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters, really quite a select gathering of artists. Only 50 out of all the thousands and thousands of artists are represented in that. Miss Bishop has been a member of the Midtown Gallery in New York City for over 50 years, is it now, Miss Bishop?
About that.
You were saying just before the show that that's rather an unusual
Well, I think it is, really. But I think the whole relationship has been remarkable in that I want to tell you something about it. Mr. Gruskin founded this gallery in, I don't know, 29 or 30, and took on some unknown young painters. But the most unusual thing was that he had the courage and conviction to rely entirely on his belief in American artists. He had nothing to back up. Most galleries had some backup. That is, some galleries owned a few old masters in the background, and Mrs. Alfred had a great collection of folk art, and this was a source of revenue so that it was possible to float along in the way of. But Mr. Gruskin believed that he could do it, banking everything on the artists that he chose. And he chose, of course, they've changed some over the years, but some have been with him since that time. And most artists that I know have changed galleries a few times, and most galleries have changed their whole list of artists a few times. And Mr. Gruskin has kept his artists, and his artists have stayed with him, and I felt great support, psychological, emotional support, and financial support through all these years.
How were those early years with the gallery? Was it a struggle for both artist and gallery?
Oh, yes, I'm sure it was. We didn't, Mr. Gruskin didn't have the idea that we would be a kind of club or anything, that we hardly ever met, and that remains true today, as we're just simply members of the gallery and have our dealings directly with him. And we haven't had a very tremendously, we haven't seen him or his wife very often.
Socially or outside of the gallery?
But still, the relationship was extremely sound one.
It was, has the philosophy of the gallery always been more or less to deal with American realists? Would that be too simple a formulation for the artist?
That would be too simple a formulation. It would be too simple. But Mr. Gruskin hasn't perhaps gone in for, he hasn't ever gone in for the latest manner. I mean, the artists he started with were figurative, and but some of them have entered into abstraction at certain times in their career, and he's allowed you to. You never felt that he would fail you or stop believing in you, no matter what you went through, whether you had a dry period in which you couldn't do anything, or if you changed your manner and did something quite different, he would back you up because he believed in you. He committed himself to a belief in you. But I must tell you that in the beginning, see, after all, he didn't have, I imagine, much of any capital. He came out of the Fogg, Harvard and the Fogg Museum, and started in the depths of the Depression, when many galleries were folding, many galleries with big reputations were folding up. He started in this way. He got these artists together, and quite a list, and there was a lot of women on it, quite a few women. And we paid $5 a month to show a picture on the wall.
What was it, a cooperative venture almost?
So it was a cooperative venture. Amazing that this $5 a month would do, but $5 and the $5. So we paid this, but the idea was that he would give you a show if he got certain response from this. You didn't pay for that, but you paid the $5. So at a time, I was exhibiting in other places, and I'd sent work in there. So I thought to myself, now I'm going to approach Mr. Gruskin, and I'm going to tell him that I think now I've got to a point where I shouldn't pay this $5. So I made this speech, and learned the speech and everything, and we started speaking to him, and he said, well, Isabel, you don't need to pay this $5.
All that worry and preparation.
He'd already decided.
Well, how have you felt being really essentially a realist painter? We were talking before the show of some, really about my admiration for some painters, yourself and Edward Hopper and Jack Levine and Raphael Sawyer, who were never swept away by the tide of modernism, which really, I think, destroyed a number of careers as artists would copy Picasso, for example, and then...
Oh, well, that was fatal, I think.
And so forth. How did you survive that? What enabled you to remain yourself as an artist?
Well, I don't quite agree with you in making it out that there was such a challenge as all that. I mean, after all,
you went through it. I'm here to listen to what you have to say.
You committed your life to an effort of a certain kind. And if you're swept away by things that are going on, well, your commitment didn't mean anything in the beginning. Really, I don't see that. I don't see that one had to be staunch and protect oneself against these things, because they were simply part of the weather. You went through certain weather. That's what it was. And when I began, the modern movement was very much in focus, and everything that I did was in relation to what I felt about the great tradition in relation to the experiments. And the experiments were valid, and the tradition was the source of everything, because where the experiments come out of, they came out, what Renoir said, where you go to learn art, you go to the Louvre. Where Picasso, his experiments came out of his knowledge of the tradition. So that from all these many years, these 50 years, I've felt the same about that. That the source was the tradition, and the experiments were great, because art must always be new, and never predictable.
I agree with you completely, but see, as far as I'm concerned, you're one of the significant artists, and whatever it takes to make an artist significant, perhaps it's the depth of the commitment, perhaps it's inborn natural insight and feeling, but so many artists were swept away in terms of following the latest fashion, and I think it still happens now that photorealism is coming in.
Well, it's been the death of them, let me tell you.
Yes, I feel that.
They have not survived, or will not survive.
Exactly.
They will not survive.
What effect on your career was the fact that you are a woman?
Well, I would say none, from the point of view of professionalism. Had I been a commercial artist, I would have felt it. I'm sure I would have got less pay for perhaps equally good work.
Yes, exactly.
I would have, if I'd been a portrait painter, which is almost a branch of commercial art in our time, I think I would have got less for commissions, even if I'd been very brilliant at it, which I wouldn't have been. But in the field of so-called fine art, never in all these 50 years have I found any notice taken of whether you're a woman or a man. Now, it's been pointed out, women's lib. I've been on panels now, gotten up by the women's lib, and they don't like to hear this at all. And they say, well, very few women in the galleries. Galleries have lists of men, 2 women, tokenism, women. But when you think of it, there aren't really that many women who were willing to put that much into this kind of a life for a whole life. And you can really sympathize, I think, with dealers who, looking at the work of young women, may be very struck by their talent, but they think, well, but so many, they'll marry, they'll have children. The chances of their keeping it on are not very great. The medical schools find this, of course. The chances that the training is going to, or that their commitment, the dealer's commitment, he has to make a commitment to a young artist to promote him. And he can reasonably hesitate.
So you feel that really, since what we're hearing so much now, I know some artists do feel that being a woman kind of affected their career, that they weren't taken seriously because of being an artist. I think Aubrey Flack has mentioned it. I think Alice Neal mentioned that. Have you?
Well,
you know
Alice,
her very well.
I know her very well, and I know she feels that, but I don't agree.
Yeah, all right, that's terrific. What has being an artist made and been any sacrifice on your life? I mean, have you not done things that you would have liked to have done because you were an artist?
Well, I think that you certainly, that's where being a woman does come into it. They're life problems. I don't think they're professional problems, really. I don't. I mean, people have said, well, maybe I was lucky enough to have a stipend, which was not great, but it's sufficient to keep me going during my student days and early professional days. So that was, but I was offered teaching jobs during that time, and maybe I wouldn't have been paid as much, but it's been said, well, how would you have earned a living? Well, that might have been a problem, but I was offered teaching jobs early. And I was very surprised. I was offered a job as artist in residence at Smith, but I was young. I couldn't believe it.
A very prestigious position.
But it's very funny. It's very funny. This is a laugh on me. When I wrote saying I couldn't do it, I didn't want to tell them that I had a husband and young baby. I didn't want to tell them that was really a good part of the reason that I refused. I said that I didn't want to take it on.
Oh, you didn't take the position?
No, I didn't take it.
Oh,
I had a husband and baby. But I didn't want, you see, I didn't want to speak to them as a woman.
Yeah, I understand.
You see, I'm mentioning this to show you that the woman part has a place, but not in the professional relationship I have found.
I understand.
And I don't know about Alice, but she thinks it has.
Yeah, well, of course, everybody has a different experience in life, and,
That's
and
true.
so we
That's
come
true.
up with our own feelings. I wonder if we can go to Miss Bishop's paintings, and we'll be talking about them in just a moment. We'll be getting our cameras over there to look at Miss Bishop's paintings. While they're getting it set up, Miss Bishop, the first picture will be the group of hobos that we were talking about before the program. You were talking that you actually brought them into the
yes,
studio.
Yes, I did. I won't tell you how this began, because I was in Antwerp. I used to go abroad quite a lot for the museum. And I was in Antwerp, sitting in a park, and I had a wonderful new pen, marvelous drawing pen, and I was drawing these people sitting in this park. When I came back and sat in Union Square, I saw the difference between these bums and those European bums. They weren't the same looking. So I approached one of these people, who actually wasn't at all American looking. He looked, I don't know what, very strange indeed. And I suppose he didn't speak English, probably. So I saw him many times sleeping on a bench, and I had drawn him many times. He didn't know it. But I wanted him to come into my studio. So I said, would you, and I explained this very simply, and he said, you want me to take my clothes off?
So what did you say to that?
No, not at all. Just wear what you have on. And I explained where it was. Then he turned out to be more scared than I was. This little building on 14th Street was being emptied, and I was the only person left in it. And I was on the second floor, and I thought, kind of wondering about this, so I put my easel on the farthest wall from the door. And he came in the door and stayed against that wall. He was more afraid than I was.
He'd heard about these wild artists.
Wild artists, he didn't know what was going to happen to him. He was very frightened. But he posed me for a long time. And his clothes were perfectly beautiful.
Yes, we'd like to have the painting on, if we can, that we're talking about. Miss Bishop's, you can actually see it up there on the monitor, Miss Bishop, while we're talking. It's,
I don't see it now.
No, well, the monitor is a little bit faded right now, but it's going out of the air very clear. But, of course, you know the picture anyway.
Yeah.
That you could probably
But anyhow, this man, his clothes I thought were perfectly beautiful. Because after all, and I'd been looking at the great pictures abroad and these beautiful folds. And so I said to him, could you leave that jacket? Because they have an awful way of pawning things and coming back with something else. So he left the jacket, and it had this great, it was a very worn out jacket, very beautiful.
And all the character in it,
all
the wrinkles,
all
the tears,
the life
the
was
dirt.
in it.
Yes.
But it had this great satin label with a Fifth Avenue shop.
Oh, no, did it?
Tailored by Finchley or something, and which was marvelous. I loved that.
What an irony. Now, did you pose the one figure for all the figures in the painting? I mean, did he pose for all the total composition, or did you get a number of
I had
different...
another man. But I didn't pose them in this. This was from a sketch in Union Square.
Oh.
I mean, this arrangement wasn't in my studio. I drew them in my studio, one by one. They weren't composed together. But the little drawing was about this big. I still like it. It was made in the square.
Here we have, coming up now, the drawing of the young lady, or is it an etching, walking on her high-heeled...
Oh, that's very recent.
Is that very recent?
Quite recent.
Was that in your recent show at the Midtown Galleries? What, last year? Didn't you have a show at the Midtown?
I think it was. Yes, it was.
And so forth.
It's just a pen drawing. I was interested in the long skirt business. I'm very interested in a costume. It seems to me to probably hold a great deal of meaning, and I don't try to rationalize it, but I'm interested in it.
In terms of what the character, the clothing assumes the character of the wearer, in a sense.
Yes, and I wanted to seem to be walking in this skirt.
Did you draw from life?
Or yes.
You work strictly from life?
Yeah. Well, my pictures are composed. After all, but I have people in my studio, and I have them walking for me.
And you're sketching them as they walk?
Oh, yes.
And when you're painting, you may not work
I'm
from
painting,
the
I
model.
may have them there, but they may not be posing.
Yeah,
but
right.
it means a lot to me to have these human beings there. Really does.
Miss Bishop, time-wise, what has happened chronologically from the first picture of the hobos through the etching of the girl to this almost abstract picture of a crowd?
Well, I can tell you,
over here.
because my preoccupation became a different one, really a different one. I don't know what year this happened, but from early time, not from the beginning, but from the time when I really felt that I was saying something of my own, I was preoccupied with the quality of mobility. That is, the onlooker should feel that the person presented could move, but was not moving.
I see.
But
Potential
could,
for movement.
Potential.
Yeah.
Now, this occupied me for years, about 20 or 30, I don't know. Then, you know, you do change, you have to,
Absolutely.
and I
You
got
have
to
to,
be
right.
perfectly fascinated, no longer by the mobility, but by the actual movement. That is, of trying to make something happen. It seemed to be happening to that the onlooker should feel it in his nervous system, not
Right.
just a description
Right.
of people walking,
Exactly.
but the happening itself.
Through almost interlocking, overlapping of planes and the
Some way,
brushwork.
I still search for a way. I don't
Yeah.
know, because I don't know, really, of anyone who's had this preoccupation, so I feel like a discoverer, in a sense, you see, which keeps one very much fascinated,
alive
you
and,
see.
and home to the creative point, so to speak. Yeah. Could we go to the next picture? This one is the young couple leaning against the
Oh, yes.
the pillar, more or less in the style of the
Well, they were rather
hobos.
interesting, because this girl called me up and she said, I've seen a review of an exhibition of yours in which you draw stenographers and such people. And said, I'm a stenographer and I have no job, and shall I come in? She came in, and she was a skinny little girl, and I thought she was interesting. She said, I have a boyfriend who's also out of work, and so the boyfriend came in. And so that I got interested in, they just happened into these, I didn't hear what they said, but they were talking together all the time and moving around, and I stopped them at this point. But one day, they were in this pose, and he turned perfectly red, and she began to cry,
Okay.
and I said, well, you better go home. So they did, but they came back the next day, oh, smiles and everything. I said, don't tell me you went and got married. Well, just as good as married.
Oh,
Which was
so
cute.
something had taken place.
And this was a few years ago.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have been anything even for a
Fashionable.
smile today.
Yeah,
But
right, exactly. Well, I guess we could go to the next picture and see what go into the, if we can, I guess we're having a little camera problem. Could we turn the next picture there? Here we go. We have a couple of, it almost appears like an etching again, a couple of shop girls, perhaps.
oh yeah, but it's in front of a snack bar. I can't see the picture.
Yeah, it
Well, there's a
appears.
snack bar under my studio.
Yeah,
that it?
yeah, I think
But
it's
anyhow.
hard for me to
Yes, that's
see.
it.
Is that it?
It's an outdoor,
Yeah, okay.
it's an outdoor lunch counter. And there's a kind of it's changed hands many times, but there's usually a big thing which has iron, it has a spigot on it, which I think is indicated there. Spigot, some juice comes out of it of some kind, chemical juice. And these interest me. I couldn't tell you why, but eating, I've made a lot of studies of people eating hot dogs and drinking these juices and such like, and they're stopping. I have a sort of sentimental feeling about these places, especially in wintertime, when I go in them and they're full of color and hideous vulgarity and really,
Yes,
and
yes.
very warm in feeling
Yes.
and warm in temperature.
Exactly, sort of a
And I
vulgar
feel that
little refuge
I have
from
the
the
feeling that
harsh
they're
world.
oases.
Exactly.
They're oases. I mean, here are these
Exactly.
people floating, working, coming to work, going from work and so on, but they collect for a few minutes in these oases, and it charms me.
Do you feel a kinship with other artists who have worked in this sense of responding to everyday life, sort of the little incidents of a couple momentarily pausing against a pillar or the shop girls looking into the window? People, there was, this began, I guess, in the 30s, and one thinks of Reginald Marsh and so
Well,
forth.
I knew Marsh
looking
very
at these.
well, and certainly we shared great interest. But our interests were a little different because he was interested in movement from the very start. I mean, he learned, he went to the medical school at Presbyterian and went through the medical course, anatomy course,
Anatomy?
took the examination even, in order that, because he had to have the body in his power to make it move and do anything he wanted to. My preoccupation was really a genre preoccupation. I was interested in what people, the way they really held something. He made them do, he was a very godlike artist, I think, and could make a world, but I didn't aspire to make a world, but I loved to see just the way it was.
Right.
And make something out of it that seemed meaningful to me. It was a different attitude.
This is what I feel. We were talking a little bit before the show of where art has gone today. That we've lost. I think we could probably talk about that. Well, that's all right. We can talk about the next one. That artists have lost sight of the visual richness and the emotional richness of the world that does surround them in the Nedics and all these little restaurants and bars and sidewalk episodes and so forth.
I have the feeling that at any moment its interest may come back, and I feel that when it does, that these artists who've been engaged in these abstract projects and schemes will find themselves very well equipped.
Oh, you think they'll be able to handle it?
I think they will.
Gee, I hope so. I've kind of felt that they got so carried away with paring art down to the absolute pure essentials, as they say, quote unquote, to using paint rollers and so forth, that they won't even be able to draw.
Yes, well, that's what's said. Well, now I have two things to say about that. One is that I was asked to teach in a school which is has very many advanced students, because they get them from all over the country, from the best art departments, by giving scholarships. And I was told, this is 1956, I was told, well, they won't be in your, I was told to teach life, but don't get your feelings hurt, there won't be anybody in the life class. They're all out there in their stalls painting these enormous abstract expressionist pictures. Well, it wasn't true. They came in and hung from the chandeliers practically in the life class, because they had never drawn from life, and here they were, these advanced students. They could draw. Now, why? Because they had been trained to design a surface. They'd been trained in a very austere concept. It didn't happen to include figuration. When they wanted to, they could draw. And I don't say they drew anatomically correctly, but they drew they could draw in aesthetic sense. Now, there's an example in New York right now of interest. That is an artist named Leslie, Alfred Leslie.
I was thinking of him.
But now, I knew Leslie.
Can we hold that picture on? We'll talk about that in a minute, a second.
I knew Leslie's work when he was an abstract artist. I always admired it. It was powerful, I thought. He used a certain amount of drip, and a certain amount of random, in other words. But it was controlled and it was strong. Right. Now, when he changed, I don't know what changed, and went into figuration, his figures are so strong, they knock you down practically. Yeah. Really, they're I mean, you can react too strongly to them. The flesh almost seems like iron or steel, but nevertheless they are figurative up to the hilt, you see, with power. So that when this decision is made, these people will be well prepared. Now, I want to tell you that when I was teaching in this school and saw these people doing these, I thought, strong and many times very beautiful abstract paintings, and I was sympathetic and able to criticize them, and they felt I was able to. I felt the next wave of students is going to be in no telling what will happen to American art because of this austere training they have had when they want to deepen the content. Now, because the content of abstract art is limited, anyone would have to say. It has the possibility of content, but limited. Exactly. It can give you a mood, or it cannot give you very much of an individual's life experience. Exactly. When they want to, I thought. Now, what happened? Pop.
Yeah.
Now, this, to my mind, let the whole thing down the drain. I think pop is just simply nothing of art. I think
it's a formal disaster as well.
It's a formal disaster. Yeah. And now I ponder this as to what happened, and I think maybe it was lack of energy in the teachers, or maybe it was lack of energy in these young people. I don't know. I think it was in the teachers, the lack of energy to see this opportunity, because the images which they might have arrived at certainly would be unpredictable and might be of the utmost thrilling character, you see.
But they were very hollow and flat and empty.
But don't you see, it didn't happen.
Exactly.
The next wave of students was let down by pop, and that was it. And they're just recovering now, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, I felt that the art world right now, and then I'd like to talk about this particular picture. We have 3 minutes left, amazingly. It's fled time, as always. That all the blind alleys have been run through, and we're really, I kind of feel that the modern art movement has collapsed. It's fragmented, and out of this fragmentation, the ashes, a new phoenix is arising. And I think Alfred Leslie, you were pointing out, I saw the show today,
oh, good.
and
I'm glad you did.
I was very impressed with it. I think he is going to be the beginning of a whole new resurgence of art based on the world around us, no matter how it's interpreted. There'll be many different ways of doing it.
Oh, and there must be, there should be,
an
infinitude of ways.
Exactly.
And it should be thoroughly experimental, so that we wouldn't be able to predict the images.
Exactly. No, the realism shouldn't be a narrowly held in any way.
I always hated the phrase "back to the figure." I thought this is ridiculous. It's not forward to any concept of the figure that ever was, but forward to a concept of the figure which never was.
Exactly, exactly. I don't know. I think we get hung up in words sometimes, and we say return or back, and everybody puts up their hands in horror. Oh no, we don't want to retreat. But it's not that at all.
Where I don't agree with you is that you, I think, have felt that this was a blind alley. I don't think so. I think it was a discipline which may or may not be used, and it has not been used because Pop didn't use it. Pop let it down. You see, Pop let it down. But But with that austere training, these people can deepen the content and will, I think.
What you were saying before the show, we were talking about that the realist, to be a good realist, must have a formal strength to the framework of his painting.
Oh, yes.
And this is what you're saying, that this abstract training
will
be of assistance
and they have had to make the surface tell everything that was told. I mean, they didn't use illusion. And illusion is a very powerful magnet, but it's very dangerous for an artist.
Exactly. The forms can become very hollow, and to be a great realist, you have to be be very aware of the structure of your painting.
Yes.
Miss Bishop, the time has passed. I'm sorry to say it's been really very enjoyable to me. We've been speaking with Miss Isabel Bishop, one of the really, I think, fine painters of our time. She shows at the Midtown Gallery. They've stuck together for 50 years and will continue to do so, I'm sure. She's a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters and a very, very fine painter. We're very glad to have her with us this afternoon. Please join Artist and Critic at its new time next week, 8:30 on Wednesday evenings, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye now.
Well, that was delightful.
Thanks very much. It was a beautiful, beautiful show.